English is literally just ship talk. That's right, ship talk. A crazy number of modern English terms come from like nautical words. Here's one example that blew my mind. The origin of quarantine. So back in the days of the plague, the city of Venice had a problem. Ships from all over the world would arrive in Venice to sell things, and then sailors from those ships would end up infecting the whole city. The Italians were sick of it, so they came up with this plan. They said, look, you can sail here if you want, but before you come into the city, you have to wait on your boat offshore for 40 days to let the virus die off. Why 40 days? Well, that's the traditional period of cleansing in the Bible. 40 days and 40 nights. And what's the word for 40 days in Italian? Quarantena, hence the word quarantine.
So we have to quarantine right away.
So it was great. We quarantined for a while.
Hello, and welcome back to the show. I'm Teddy, the Jack Sparrow of YouTube, with all the bad jokes and none of the booty. Today I've picked a few of my favorite words and phrases from nautical origins, and I've split them into 3 very scientific categories to share with you. First is my favorite, which is all of the rope expressions. So on a ship, you have hundreds of ropes, and each one has a different function. Some are supposed to like hold up the mast, others are meant to control the sails. So you needed to quite literally learn the ropes, or else you'd be sent home on an honorable discharge. So that's where this expression comes from. Nowadays, if you say know the ropes in English, it means that you understand something or you've gotten the hang of it.
You're only here to learn the ropes, okay?
I don't need to learn the ropes around here, you feel me?
Now, one of the most important ropes on the ship is this rope right here that goes around the edge of the ship. It's there to prevent people from falling off of the ship and dying. It's meant to save lives, hence the name Lifeline. Lifeline has also meant these kinds of rope systems that are used to save people who've fallen overboard, which is why this painting is called The Lifeline. This is obviously the origin of the word lifeline, which we use now to refer to basically anything that can save you.
You hold out a lifeline to them and then you just throw it away.
I'll use the lifeline.
Another important rope is this one. On one end, it's connected to this little post called a bit, and on the other end, it's connected to something else, normally the anchor, so they can pull the anchor up and down. And this rope was vital for keeping the boat steady. Let's say there's a big storm and you don't want to die. Well, you're going to lower your anchor using more and more rope up until the end, right by the bits, which is also known as the bitter end. That's why we say we're doing something to the bitter end. It has nothing to do with a bitter taste or a bitter outcome, but everything to do with this literal nautical term, the bitter end, the very end of the rope.
Fight to the bitter end, you crack-headed jackass!
We didn't make it before, but this time we are going to see it through to the bitter end.
There were so many ropes on these ships that sometimes the sailors would get cheap, and instead of buying new ropes, they'd just take the ends of 2 different ropes and splice them together. Naval surgeon and writer Tobias Smollett started using this as a metaphor for saving money at the end of a fiscal year. In his words, make the 2 ends of the year meet. Nowadays, this expression, making ends meet, has nothing to do with ropes. It just means getting by with a small amount of money at the end of the month. And remember, the only way that I make ends meet is if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. How else am I supposed to feed my Gretchen, Wilbur, Eugene, Chaz?
Because they had to, make ends meet and stuff.
Teaching's been more or less a way of making ends meet.
Sometimes these words aren't named after specific parts of the ship, but after infamous characters in the nautical world. I found 2 wild cases of this. First is the word groggy, which comes from this guy, Admiral Edward Vernon. He was a super famous admiral, so much so that George Washington's Mount Vernon is named after him. But anyways, his signature outfit was a cloak made of this material called grogram, hence his nickname, Old Grog. Old Grog was apparently a really strict guy. One day he saw the sailors were drinking and he was like, nuh-uh, no drinking on my ship. From now on, we're watering down the rum. And all the sailors were like, ugh, Old Grog is being annoying again. So they named this gross, watered down rum Grog. If you drink lots of this alcohol, then you feel groggy. And that's why nowadays we say groggy to mean dazed or kind of confused in a weird state.
If I'm still feeling groggy, then I'll just take it out.
I can't take that stuff, it makes me groggy.
There's also another guy that has a word named after him, and his name was Captain Fudge. I wish I was joking. Sounds like the mascot for an off-brand Cocoa Puffs. But this guy, Captain Fudge, is the guy that inspired our use of the term to fudge something, meaning to deceive in a kind of clumsy or awkward way. Apparently, this Captain Fudge guy was infamous for his lies. According to one historical anecdote, there was, sir, in our time one Captain Fudge, upon his return from a voyage, how ill-fraught soever his ship, always brought home a good cargo of lies, so much that now aboard the ship the sailors, when they hear a great lie told, cry out, you fudge it. Just 6 years after that story was published, all the landlubbers started to say fudge to refer to this kind of deception or trickery.
We can fudge the rule.
Of course, if you have the mouth of a sailor, they're not saying that you have a very pleasant vocabulary. Which brings me to my next category, insults and dirty words. One iconic insult is son of a gun, which comes from literal childbirth at sea. Apparently in the early 1800s, wives of sailors were sometimes allowed to join their hubbies at sea. For reasons that mommy and daddy will explain later, these women would often get pregnant on board. So when it came time for them to give birth on the ship, they would run into a problem. There's no space on the boat to give birth. The only place to pop those suckers out was between the cannons. And a child born this way was called a son of a gun. And it wasn't a very nice term either back then, in part because these kids kind of had dubious paternity.
You are not the father.
That explains why in 1867, the sailor's word book described son of a gun as being an epithet conveying contempt in a slight degree.
Son of a gun. Son of a gun.
We also have the nautical insult sloppy, not from kids, but from clothes. In 1623, the Royal Navy saw that their sailors were dressed in all these terrible rags and tatters. So they decided to require every ship to have some ready-made clothing called slops, kind of the low-rise jeans of their day. These were baggy, one-size-fits-all clothes that they'd stuff in a trunk for months on end. Needless to say, these clothes would sit in there for a long time, and when it came time to take them out, they would often be damp and, well, sloppy. And that's why sloppy nowadays means careless and not neat.
We're getting sloppy.
Hey, sloppy.
Now this next word really surprised me. The word cranky doesn't come from cranks at all. One popular theory is that this word traces its origins back to the Dutch word crankt, meaning laid over on its side. Soon the English bastardization of it, crank, would be used to describe ships that had fallen over. A cranky or crank-sided ship is a ship that has no stability and can very easily fall over to one side. People then started using this word cranky in a more metaphorical way, not to refer to ships, but to people's temperaments. With one poet writing, "There's no better ballast for keeping the mind steady on keel and saving it from all the crankiness than business."
Isn't she a cranky old maid?
Is it because we have a test tomorrow? Sometimes I get cranky.
Other words started out as sailor insults, but now have just been accepted as regular words in the English language, like filibuster, which literally just meant pirate from the Dutch vrijbuiter. Throughout most of the 19th and 20th century, filibuster just meant a buccaneer that raided ships out in the West Indies and Central America. So later, when American politicians started hijacking speeches to stop bills from getting passed, it was seen as a violent takeover and was described as, quote, filibustering against the United States. Now, these are just a fraction of the words that I found. There are a whole bunch of them. I could easily do another video or two on them. So if you're also interested in this, let me know. Special thanks to all my supporters on Patreon who have my undying love. Check out this other video that I made about the etymology of these weird French words, because we have all these words in English that are like fake French that the French wouldn't even accept. I explain it better over there. Go see it. See you over there. Bye-bye.